Hello, and welcome to MRA's 5-Minute HR Feed, the podcast where we share quick and practical information. In the time it takes you to go grab a cup of coffee, you'll gain insights into hot topics and pressing HR issues. I'm your host, Nicole Morehouse, and we're glad you're listening. Before we start, here's our usual disclaimer that the information being shared is not and should not be considered legal advice. Now let's dive into our topic.
All right, let's get started with today's topic. This one might fall under the category of no good deed goes unpunished. We haven't heard that in HR before, have we? And next month, you'll probably see and hear from us on other things that fall under that category of no good deed goes unpunished. Talking about things like employee gift giving, gift cards, hosting holiday parties, and all of those sorts of things. Today, I want to talk about grossing up employee compensation and the potential pitfalls of grossing up employee compensation. In many organizations, bonuses, for example, are a key component of employee compensation. They're designed to reward performance, incentivize productivity, and retain talent. One practice that is not all that uncommon in the administration of bonuses is to gross them up, where employers increase the bonus amount to, quote unquote, cover the taxes, and we'll revisit that in a moment, so that employees receive the intended net amount. And that net amount is in their checking account, in their savings account, or they're walking away with a physical check for that amount. While this might seem very attractive on the surface, it can introduce some significant and potential issues related to equity, compliance, and organizational fairness. Taking a step back, let's talk real quickly about what exactly grossing up is. Those of you on the call that work in accounting, finance, payroll, HR space, you might know what this is already, but if you're not familiar with it, a gross up occurs when an employer calculates in a bonus scenario, for example, so that after taxes are withheld and other deductions, that the employee receives a predetermined net amount. So for example, this is a real high level calculation. It's actually more complicated than this, but it kind of demonstrate this for you, that if an employee is expecting to receive a $5,000 bonus and their tax rate 30%, the company is actually going to issue a gross amount check for $7,143. So that after taxes, the employee still receives a cool $5,000. And that sounds really amazing. Seems like the right thing to do. But this podcast is just to talk about some considerations, some potential pitfalls, so you can keep those in mind. There is the potential for inequity, and that might come in the form of, an actual or perceived assessment that this is a disproportionate benefit. Some employees are getting, $7,143 where somebody else got $6,220. And so employees with higher tax rates will receive larger bonuses, while those with lower tax rates will get less. And this means that employees in higher tax brackets or with more deductions end up getting a more substantial gross bonus. And that's giving them more so that they get the same net amount, which could be perceived as unfair by others. And I think there's a risk potentially that it could be not just perceived, but it could be viewed and determined as unfair pay practices. Why did Brad get $7,143 while Beth got $6,220? Keep in mind, too, that the gross amount is what will show on the employee's W-2. So the employer is not necessarily, quote unquote, covering all the taxes associated with the bonus. And I'm not sure how likely the scenario is to happen, how often it happens, but, this bump in the gross amount to yield a certain net amount could change where that employee's tax liability, what tax bracket they fall into. There are examples of inconsistent application. So is your organization grossing up in these circumstances, but not these, to these people, but not to these people? So, because, for example, if you grossed up bonuses for only executives, for this type of bonus, obviously that would be problematic. So inconsistent application could be hugely problematic. So even if they're, the whole tax advantage, disadvantage, disproportionate benefit thing aside, inconsistent application could certainly cause problems. And if you're an organization that's been really trying to tackle having an equitable pay philosophy and, administering pay fairly, this manipulation of the bonus to account for individual tax situations, it might actually inadvertently undermine your efforts to maintain pay equity. Employees might start to question why some people receive higher bonuses than others. They don't really understand the mechanisms of how this all works. And if you think these amounts are secret, they're not. You know that your employees, discuss these within the organization, but I don't know if the right terminology for this is like they're underground websites where this information is actually shared outside your organization. So people in the same job or same industry sometimes are engaging on these chat websites where they tell each other how much their bonuses for the year are, competitive compensation, kind of keeping each other in the know. And so that is problematic as well. And so on the surface, you might think like, okay, well, everyone got $5,000. Everyone's happy. And sometimes it does happen. I'm not going to deny that. Everyone walks away with $5,000 and they're super happy. But again, you have someone that gets over $7,000 and the other person gets a $6,000 bonus. If you think about it and kind of the reverse math of that, and why that might be problematic, that's just kind of what I'm trying to highlight here. Transparency issues. Again, employees might not fully understand how the bonuses are calculated, all the math and things that go into it. And so that lack of understanding can lead to, maybe perhaps some eroded trust in your compensation system. Outside these like pay equity and pay transparency issues, there are other organizational potential impacts. A real simple one to kind of wrap your head around is, the administrative complexity, the Rockstar payroll folks listening. If you're listening, you know more about how this all works when you have to do it. And sometimes you're asked to do one check, or you might be asked to do 500 checks where you're doing this gross up calculation. And so it's not a click of a button. It's not that simple. There's a higher risk of errors. And those, again, in payroll, accounting, finance, you know that a payroll error is not insignificant to fix. Of course, cost implications, if you're grossing up a bonus and you're paying $7,000 instead of, 5,000 minus taxes, right? Obviously, there's a difference there, and that difference could be eating out of other, programs or things like that, other compensation programs, new compensation programs, or other business priorities. So you distributing those funds the way that you want to distribute them in a way that's getting you the best return on investment. And then this last one is just kind of an interesting one to think about. And I'm not trying to weigh in on it one way or another, but is there some sort of tax system distortion happening? Could grossing up practices be seen as, perhaps circumventing the intent of our existing tax systems where, higher income earners are, in a different tax obligation and that sort of thing. And so by offsetting tax liabilities and that sort of thing too, are we, I don't know, messing around in a system of, inadvertently messing around with an existing tax framework. So just kind of an interesting one to think about. With that, I'm going to conclude and just wrap everything up by saying that in HR, we often say no good deed goes unpunished. And I think that this is one to think about. Not advising one way or the other. I just wanted to give you some considerations if you are thinking about adopting this practice, or you're about to hit that time of year where you're going to start issuing bonuses and this is a practice in your organization. I just wanted to offer those potential pitfalls. And so if you wanted to, want to approach things to maintain fairness and equity, maybe consider some of these drawbacks, think things through again, and maybe perhaps look at other compensation opportunities, explore alternatives, etc., so that you have very equitable approaches to employee compensation. So with that, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to MRA's 5-Minute HR Feed. Be sure to follow and connect with us for more podcasts and updates. If you're a member and have questions, you can always connect with MRA's 24/7 HR hotline by emailing infonow@mranet.org or by calling 866-474-6854.